Hello students, now we are moving to unit 2 macroeconomics, unit 3 macroeconomics. See, remember, so we have already discussed about the circular flow of income model. You are believing you guys are strong in this part. So, and then the syllabus content, what they have given, to look at national income accounting as a measure of economic activity, and in the diagram circular flow of income model showing the interaction between decision makers and leakages and injections. See, once again we'll quickly look at this circular flow of income model. See, look at the economic decision makers are household, firms, government, financial markets, banks, and the other countries, foreign country, abroad. See, look at households are providing factors of production to the firms, okay, and the firms are receiving that, and for that the firms are paying a payment, that is wages, rent, interest, and profit. Meanwhile, the firms are making a product and they're sending to the, they're making the product sending to the product market where households are buying the product and they're making an expenditure, right? That is the income to the firms. This is how the transaction is taking place between the parties. But sometimes households may save their money, whatever they have received, right? Not completely, some portion of money they will save and some portion of money they will pay tax to the government, and some money they will spend on imported item. Similarly, whatever the money received as a deposit from the household, the firms as a banking institution or financial market, they will again lend loan to the firms, so that is investment, and government tax revenue will be used for the government spending, right? And the firms also receive income from their exports. So the transaction is taking place between these agents, economic agents, right? So this should be equal, right? So here it is, this is said to be a leakages in the transaction, this is said to be a injection in the transaction. See, and the next thing is equivalence of income, output, and expenditure approach on national income accounting with reference to the circular flow of income model. So what we can conclude now, household expenditure is income of the firms, right? Household expenditure is income of the firms, and for that firms are sending a goods, like the transaction is taking place for output, okay? Firms are making sending goods to the product market. So for this output households are spending money, right? That money is income to the firms, right? So what we can conclude, expenditure of household and income of the firms should be equivalent to the income of the firms should be equivalent to the output. So income and the expenditure and the output both are equal. All three are equal. Income, output, and expenditure, all three are equal, right? This is what we can conclude from the circular flow of income model. So the GDP, the national income, means total amount of transaction took place in the country, or total volume of total income of the country. So instead of national income you can go for the GDP, that is best one. So which means monetary value of total output produced in the country in a year. So total value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a year. So particular year, how much total value of all final goods. See, every product, there are millions of products are there in the country. Even in the one small town or in our house also, you could see there are thousands of products, right? So in the country there will be definitely millions of products, maybe billions of products will be there. So everything, see how much every product we are telling in terms of money only. All the product are measured in terms of money. For example, mobile phone is 30,000, laptop is 50,000, like that we are telling everything in terms of money. So how much total value? This is what it is, GDP is talking. Right, GDP will be calculated based on this method, three method. One is expenditure method, and income method, and output method. So we have discussed all three methods are equal. But only the advantage of expenditure method is the best. Expenditure method is considered as a good one comparing with the income method and output method. Okay, and this is this formula, GDP equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M, or else you can mark it AD equal to C plus I plus G plus X minus M. This is the formula of expenditure method. right? And national income, gross national income, GDP means AD equal to GDP means C plus I plus G plus X minus M, or else in return terms you can say total value of all final goods and services produced in the country in a specific time period or in a year. Meanwhile, national income means the total income received by the residents of the country. So which means national income means GDP minus income received from abroad plus income sent to abroad plus income received from abroad, or else simply you can make it GNI equal to gross national income equal to GDP plus net income from abroad. Net income from abroad means income received from abroad should be added and income sent to abroad should be deducted. See, because of during IPL match, now IPL match is happening, you know that foreign players are playing in IPL match, they are also receiving the money, and after this after IPL match got all the money they are taking home, right? This money deducted from the in the gross national income, this foreign citizens, those who are working, and foreign companies, those who are foreign companies, they are doing business in India, all these transactions should be deducted. Meanwhile, Indian companies, Indian players, Indians are also working in the foreign country, so that money they are also sending to India, so that is said to be a remittance. That money added in the gross national income. So gross national income equal to GDP plus net income from abroad. So what you can do now, so in the paper 2 you can expect a question like how they will be asking, they will be giving information like this information they will be giving, and they will be asked us to calculate GDP, how much the GDP is there. So you need to use this formula C plus I plus G plus X minus M. So if you are adding, if you are just logically thinking, you can get full mark for this one. And GNI also they will be asking to calculate. So obviously GDP plus net income from abroad means you need to add income received from abroad and you need to deduct income sent to abroad, and how much total income, how much total you are earning, that is the GNI, gross national income. And nominal GDP and nominal GNI. Nominal GDP will be calculated based on the current year price, based on the current year price and current year output. See, for example, in 2022, how much the government, how much India produced the goods, how much the volume of the in 2022 total output of 2022 and the price of 2022. If you are multiplying those two, then you will get a nominal GDP. In simple terms, you can remember nominal, and nominal means it is current year price and current year output, and real means it is a base year price and base year output. See, real means it is adjusted with the inflation. So because how much the price changes over time period, that is adjusted with the inflation. Okay, and please remember this formula: real GDP equal to nominal GDP upon price deflator into 100. So if anything is there, then you will easily calculate the rest of the things. See, sometimes GDP deflator also they might be mentioning GDP deflator or price deflator, both are same. So they will be giving nominal data, nominal GDP data, they will be giving a GDP deflator or price deflator, and they will ask us to calculate real GDP. Or else what they will be doing, they will give real GDP data and price deflator data, and they will ask us to calculate nominal GDP. And or else they will be giving both nominal GDP and real GDP data, and they will ask us to calculate price deflator. So please remember this formula: real GDP equal to nominal GDP upon price deflator into 100. So just if you do have a basic mathematical skill, you can easily calculate what is nominal GDP, what is real GDP, what is price deflator, or else GDP deflator also they might be saying sometime. Sometimes they will give like a data like this, there will be empty box and they will ask us to fill this one. So real GDP is there, GDP deflator is there, nominal GDP, then you need to use this formula to calculate the missing number. Okay. And next thing is they will be asking real GDP per capita income, nominal GDP per capita income. Per capita means GDP upon population. So average income of the citizen. See, real GDP is this much, suppose real GDP is 25 million and the population is just 10,000 population, and we can conclude that real GDP per capita is $2,500. Yeah, $2,500. And meanwhile, real GNI per capita, again, real GNI upon population. See, if something asked per capita means whatever the number divided by population, that's it. See, suppose real GNI is 30 million and population is 10,000, and real GNI, this is not GDP, GNI. GNI per capita equal to 30 million upon 10,000 equal to $3,000. So this is easy, not difficult, right? So per capita means GDP per capita means GDP upon population. GDP upon population. If they are asking real GDP per capita means you mention real GDP upon population. Real GNI per capita means real GNI upon population. Nominal GDP per capita means nominal GDP upon population, like that. And interestingly, this GDP is it should be like a purchasing power parity. See, comparison of GDP per capita across countries require measures of a per capita outcome or income based on the conversion of national currencies into US dollar by using purchasing power parity to eliminate the influence of price difference on the value of output or income. See, look at here. The interesting thing is they are asking real GDP at purchasing power parity, real GDP per capita or real GDP per capita at purchasing power parity. So the thing is, each country is having a different their own currencies. See, for example, Singapore, they are having the Singapore dollar, Australia Australian dollar, India Indian rupee, and Russia ruble, in USA, you know that, US dollar. So these information, each country is having their own currencies, and each countries are having a different price level, and the same basket of goods. See, for example, 10 goods, 10 goods, right? The same goods and services, if we are measuring in India how much, in the United States how much, in the European Union how much, and in the Australia how much. So each country is having a different price level, different cost of living, right? If we are converting to the one currency, for example, Indian rupee to US dollar, and the same basket of goods in the US dollar in India, the same basket of goods in the Singapore, the same dollar in US dollar. So if we are converting everything into the one currency, and that only will speak the actual price fluctuation in the country, actual cost of living in the country. That's what the countries are using, the purchasing power parity, right? And the next part is calculation of real GDP. See, look at paper 2, you can expect calculation of real GDP per capita and real GNI per capita. Just now we have done this one. And the next part is business cycle and short term fluctuation, and also here is there any information, calculation of real GDP and using price deflator, we have done this one. And calculation of GNI data, calculation of real GDP set of national income using expenditure method. Okay, this we have done it, this one, this is the expenditure method. Okay, then we'll move on the next part. I don't think this information is not required right now based on the given syllabus content, so just leave it. And we'll move on business cycle concept, right? And GDP deflator, we have done this one. Okay, GDP deflator, and they might be asking GDP growth, real GDP growth. So it is like a real GDP year 2 minus real GDP year 1 upon real GDP year 1 into 100. If you are using this formula, you can easily calculate the real GDP growth rate. So that we will come back, that we'll discuss in a later stage. The next one is business cycle. So business cycle means it is a short-term fluctuation and long-term economic growth. Like business cycle means it is a short-term fluctuation and long-term growth trend. This is the long-term growth trend, and this is the short-term fluctuation. That red line is the long-term growth trend, and this fluctuation is the short term fluctuation. So sometimes it will be increasing, sometimes it will be decreasing. What is that? No, real GDP. Real GDP sometimes increase, sometimes decrease, and it will reach lowest level and it will reach highest level, peak level. So this is continuously taking place over the time period, right? See, look at when the real GDP is increasing, we can say that expansion in the real GDP or recovery in the real GDP. So during this stage, what will happen? Unemployment will fall because GDP is increases. GDP increases means output increases. Output increases means obviously there is a more employment opportunities because income also increases, investment also increases. So that will increase the employment opportunities. And if there is the decreasing portion, this portion is said to be a contraction in the real GDP, which means real GDP is falling, which means unemployment is increasing. Why no? The real GDP is falling means obviously income is falling. Income is falling means aggregate demand is falling, and that is also causes fall in the investment, and fall in the investment means fall in the output, and that creating unemployment increases. So here in the peak periods, you look at actual GDP is greater than the potential level. So here unemployment level is it is greater than lower than the natural rate of unemployment. See, each country will be having a natural rate of unemployment that will be around 3% of unemployment. Some countries 2 to 3% they are telling. If the unemployment rate is 2 to 3% level, then usually that is said to be a full employment level. So during peak stage, what we can conclude? No, the actual unemployment is lower than the natural rate of unemployment. This is the conclusion we can come to know from the during peak stage. Meanwhile, during trough stage or depression stage, actual GDP is lower than the potential GDP, and there is an output gap. Unemployment is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. See, unemployment rate is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. Here unemployment is started to fall when the GDP increases. When the GDP falls, unemployment is started to increase, right? And during peak, actual unemployment is lower than the natural unemployment, and during trough, actual unemployment is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. So long term growth, full employment GDP equal to full employment GDP, potential GDP equal to full employment GDP, and unemployment equal to natural rate of unemployment. Okay, during this, during long term growth, what will happen? Potential GDP equal to full employment level of GDP, and unemployment equal to natural rate of unemployment. So natural rate of unemployment, it is country to country varying. 2 to 3% is considered as a natural rate of unemployment. See, no need to panic because natural rate of unemployment is just actually if everybody employed in the country, and there will be some people are voluntarily not working, and they may want to take some casual time period lesser for, and they want to delay to go for the work. So this happens, right? It is not necessary everybody should work, and some percentage of people, 2 to 3% of people, they may not interested to work at the time period because of they may for the voluntary unemployment, because of they may be interested in the studies. So certain reasons, certain factors. Okay, so the next one is comparison over time. See, approaches of using GDP and GNI statistics measures economic well-being, and use of national income statistics for this one, for making comparison over time and comparison between countries. See, increase in real GDP, some percentage for a particular country may overestimate or underestimate. It is not necessary. The real GDP will be speaking the truth about the economy. Sometimes the estimation, real GDP may overestimate the actual number because informal economy is not included, parallel economy is not included, and there is many factors of there. See, there is a product quality is different country to country, and health and education facilities and also varying country to country. But if we are going with the same one method of calculation or measurement for all the countries, it will not be the truth. Okay, sometimes, so that's the reason sometimes the real GDP of a particular country may be overestimated or may be underestimated. So the true changes in the population economic well-being because of the such factors: improved product quality and health and education, improvement quality of life and size of the informal market. So many factors is affecting. Right? We cannot definitely say that real GDP is the right or good one. And comparison between countries. So this is also the countries already see each country is different, and each country's economic system is different, and each countries are like some countries are advanced, some countries are backward. So GDP and GNI both measure the true value of output. It is not true actually, but to some extent it is only true, but it is not completely true. See, both these factors are excluding many factors. See, for example, see, higher level of GDP per capita one country might be having, which is concentrated among the small population. See, countries like Denmark, Norway, these countries GDP will be definitely higher, GDP per capita, because those countries population is very small. While another country may have a lower level of GDP per capita and which is more equally distributed. Right, lower level of GDP per capita which is more equally distributed. So countries like India, the population size is huge, even though the country is producing large amount of output, but still the real GDP per capita is lower. So why GDP and GNI do not accurately measure the true value of output? See, GDP and GNI do not include non-marketed items. This is very important, because if it is everything is documented, non-marketed item means sometimes there is a barter system, like an exchange of goods for goods, that is also there. And see, household expenditure, like homemaker or household expenditure, those things are less calculated, underestimated, and output sold in underground market is not included, and the quality improvements in goods and services different countries to country, and negative externality, value of negative externality, measuring externality, it is a big challenge, and depletion of the natural resources, each country having a different amount of natural resources and keep on it is depleting. So these are the factors which is affecting. So that's the reason GDP and GNI is not accurately measuring the true value of the output. So this part you can expect question in either in the paper 1 or else in the paper 3. So what are the reasons behind, right? So please be thorough in this. These are the key terms. So GDP and GNI do not include marketed items, and output sold in underground market is not included in the GDP calculation and also GNI calculation. The quality of the products or goods and services different country to country, and value of the negative externalities, it is difficult to measure, and the country it is varying again, and the natural resources are continuously depleting, and countries to country there is a different amount of natural resources. This is also affecting. That's the reason GDP and GNI is not accurately measure the true value of output, but some extent it is, we can accept. Comparing with other measures of national income, GDP GNI is little better. And the next one is alternative measure of well-being. Economic well-being is highly important. That's the reason in the in this new syllabus also the IB included economic well-being. See, look at what are the alternative measures for well-being. See, OECD countries, OECD Better Life Index. See, OECD means Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. This organization is used Better Life Index. In the Better Life Index, they have used some certain components to measure the well-being of the present and also well-being of the future. They included health status and work-life balance, education and skills, social connections, and governance or civic engagement, environmental quality, personal security, subjective well-being, and income and wealth, and jobs and earning, and housing. These components are included, and they measured and developed better life index. Based on that, they are telling the economic well-being of the country. So comparing with the GDP or GNI, this OECD Better Life Index is much better. But again, we cannot definitely say that this is it's a best and better estimate. But if more components are included in the measuring the quality of life, so this will help to speak little more detail about the well-being of the present, or real economic development, or real living standard of the country. And resources for well-being in the future: natural capital, economic capital, human capital, and social capital. These everything is included. So much detail is not required. They have just asked AO2, assessment objective 2, which means they will be asking 4 more questions. Even if you are just including this one, human capital, natural capital, economic capital, and social capital, that is more than enough. It will give better thing. I mean, you could score more marks. So in the OECD Better Life Index, components are state of health, work-life balance, education and skills, social connections, and governance, environmental quality, personal security, and subjective well-being, and income and wealth, jobs and earning, and housing. This is the present well-being, and the future economic, human capital, and social, economic, human, social, and natural capital. These are the components. And another index which is used to measure the economic well-being is happiness index. This is also another interesting method which is measures which help to measure the economic well-being. Happiness index is developed by or compiled by United Nations Sustainable Development Network. In this, they are using real GDP per capita is the one component, social support is the another component, healthy life expectancy, freedom to make life choices, generosity, and the perception of corruption. See, these are the components. 6 components are included in the happiness index. So they are real GDP per capita. So GDP per capita is inevitable component in all the 3 method of measuring economic well-being. So real GDP per capita one thing, and social support is the another factor, and healthy and life expectancy is one more factor, and freedom to make life choices, generosity, perception of corruption. These are the components which is used to measure the happiness index. And another index is Happy Planet Index. Happy Planet Index is like included life expectancy is one component, economic well-being is the another component, and inequality of outcome is third component upon ecological footprint. Life expectancy, economic well-being, inequality of outcomes upon ecological footprint. These are the used to measure the Happy Planet Index. So this method, you just remember the alternative measures of economic well-being: OECD Better Life Index, Happy Planet Index, Happiness Index, and Happy Planet Index. Okay. And next we are moving towards aggregate demand. Aggregate demand means total demand. Aggregate means total. Aggregate demand means total demand in the country. So like a demand curve, aggregate demand curve is also downward sloping. Remember, in the vertical axis it's a average price level. Okay, in the vertical axis it is average price level, and in the horizontal axis or x-axis it is a real GDP. It is a real GDP or national output or real output. You can mention real GDP, real output, national output. You can say that. See, if you are marking quantity, then definitely it is wrong. Then you will not be getting a marks, right? So here price level and real GDP. Okay, and aggregate supply is also, this is said to be a short-run aggregate supply. because in the business cycle we have discussed the aggregate demand changes. It is a short-term fluctuation. Short-term fluctuation is like a keep on changing, increasing, decreasing, increasing, decreasing. But long-term growth is different. Long-term is like a good fit line, like it is. I mean, long-term calculation is different. So that's the reason certain aggregate supply curve is like it is a upward sloping, right? And again, real GDP is the here, and in the horizontal axis, real GDP or real output or national output you can mention, and here it is average price level. Okay, these are the things. And the component of aggregate demand. In order to calculate this one, aggregate demand, what are the component means? Consumption plus investment plus government spending, C plus I plus G plus X minus M. This is the thing. Okay, this aggregate demand curve is calculated based on the consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus export minus import. So those are said to be a components of aggregate demand. And each component of aggregate demand is influenced by many factors. So for example, consumption is influenced by consumer confidence, one thing, and interest rate also influence, and wealth also influence, income taxes, level of household indebtedness, expectation of future price level. So these are the components which definitely influence the consumption factor of the aggregate demand. See, for example, consumer confidence increases means consumption increases means aggregate demand increase, right? And if interest rate increases means then consumption will decrease, because the people will save their money, that will give more return, so they will reduce the interest, they will reduce the consumption. So aggregate demand will be coming down because of the fall in the consumption. Okay, and the wealth, if more wealth means obviously more income is there, more wealth means then the people are able to spend more, so obviously aggregate demand increases. Aggregate demand increases means same like how the demand curve increases. See, look at it, increases means it moves outward, and decreases means it moves leftward. That is the difference. And EAD1, EAD2 just label perfectly based on the information given. And income increases means obviously aggregate demand increases. Income decreases means aggregate demand decreases. So aggregate demand decreases means real GDP decreases. So this, and the demand curve is completely changing. And level of household indebtedness. See, if more indebtedness means the people they will not be spending more. If they are having less indebtedness means they will be having opportunity to spend more amount. So obviously consumption will increase, that will influence the aggregate demand. So expectation of future price level. If the consumers are thinking future price level will be increasing, now the consumption will increase and aggregate demand will increase now itself. And if the consumers are thinking or people are thinking future expectation price level will be falling down, and what will happen now, the consumption will be falling down, and real GDP and aggregate demand and real GDP both will be falling down later. Okay, so these are the thing. And the investment is also influenced by certain factors. One is interest rate, business confidence, technology, business tax, and the level of corporate indebtedness. So interest rate is common for both consumption and investment, right? In interest rate increases, obviously investment component also will come down, that will also bring down the aggregate demand, right? So just apply your logical sense, it is not much difficult. If you are just applying your logical sense, you can easily score. And the next one is business confidence. If business confidence is increases, aggregate demand increases, and if business confidence is lower, then aggregate demand will be falling down. So during COVID time, you know that both business confidence and consumer confidence both were low level, because the people were worrying about when the pandemic is going to end. So because of these two, lack of confidence is caused decrease in the real GDP of not only one country and the entire globe. So the COVID pandemic pushed the entire global economy into the deep recession, right? And the recent statistics say that our report states that it will take another 10 to 12 years to recover from the completely recover from the COVID pandemic economic damage. And the next one is technology is one more factor which affect the investment, and this investment will again affecting the aggregate demand. See, if advanced technology means again technological improvement means obviously investment will be more, and more investment will increase the real GDP. And business taxes are more than people or investors are discouraged to invest because of the higher taxes. So then obviously the investment component will be coming down, and investment component coming down means aggregate demand also fall. And level of corporate indebtedness, again, if the corporate is having less debt, then they will be having more opportunity to invest more. If the corporate is having more debt, then they will be having less opportunity for the further investment, so investment will be coming down, then that will also cause to aggregate demand to fall down. And the government expenditure, next component is government expenditure, this one. And political and economic priorities. So political priority means like if any changes in the political institutions, that also changes in the government expenditure, that also influence the aggregate demand. But sometimes economic priorities, see, during global financial crisis or during COVID economic crisis, so it is a government, whether it is a ideology, political ideology may be different to government, party to party, but during the economic crisis like COVID time, whether it is Republic Party or Congress, then they have to spend money, so in order to recover the economic activity. So economic priority is also important. And the income, export and import, income from trading partners, income of trading partners, exchange rate and trade policies, these also affecting the exchange rate, income and export. For example, exchange rate is falling, depreciating, then export will be increasing, import will be falling down. And trade policies, it is favorable to the exporter, export will be increasing. Free trade, obviously export will increase, and restricted trade, obviously export will be coming down. Right, the same thing for import also. Okay, and the shift of the aggregate demand curve caused by changes in the determinants. These are the factors which will be affecting the aggregate demand curve, and it might be increasing right side or it might be decreasing left side based on the given information. But these are the components. And the next one is shortened aggregate supply curve determinants. Obviously, the cost of production is inevitable factors of inevitable in which will obviously shift the shortened aggregate supply curve. If more cost of production, then aggregate supply curve might be moving left side, shortened aggregate supply curve might be shifting left side. And if less cost for factors of production, then aggregate supply curve might be moving right side. Right, this may be like left side when it is moving higher cost of production, and the same may be shortened aggregate supply may be left side, right side when it is lower cost of production. So indirect taxes will decrease the shortened aggregate supply. Right, and this is how the shortened aggregate supply curve changes, right side or left side. The same thing like a supply curve. Right, no need to be think too much on this one, and apply the same logic whatever you will learn for demand and supply case. Okay, then alternative views of aggregate supply. See, look at here, the classical approach, classical view is different and monetarist view is different. See, in the long run aggregate supply, classical economists are thinking this is the vertical, long run aggregate supply curve is like a vertical one. Right. See, earlier we have seen that this part, what is that? 1 second. Here you could see that the long run aggregate supply curve, supply is like it's a good fit line, right? So that's the reason classical economists are thinking long run aggregate supply curve is like a vertical line, straight line. But Keynesian approach is different, and Keynesian is believing long run aggregate supply curve is like this one. See, look at here, this one. So initially it is for up to certain level or full employment level, the long run aggregate supply curve is like a uh, elastic one, or you can say horizontal one, right? The price level is remaining same, but there is an increase in real GDP. But afterwards it is turning in its phase, it's a completely vertical. So here the price level only increasing, but real GDP is not increasing beyond this. So this is the Keynesian approach. So Keynesian long run aggregate, Keynesian aggregate supply curve is little different from classical aggregate supply curve. Okay, this is the thing, Keynesian view of the aggregate supply and inflationary and deflationary gaps. See, in the classical economy, see, you know that this is certain aggregate supply curve we have discussed little earlier, and this is aggregate demand curve. So intersecting point is said to be an equilibrium level. Okay, this is said to be a general equilibrium level, right? This is the current GDP of the economy, actual GDP of the economy. If the potential GDP is larger, than the actual GDP, this is actual GDP or equilibrium GDP, this is the potential GDP. So from this picture itself we can conclude that potential GDP is larger than the actual GDP. So this gap is said to be a recessionary gap. They are telling inflationary or deflationary gap. This gap is said to be a deflationary or recessionary gaps. Okay, in the case of classical view, Keynesian view also, we can say that this is the full employment level of GDP, right? So where the aggregate supply curve is changing its phase, right, from horizontal to vertical, it is turning. This is said to be this portion is said to be a full employment level of portion. Okay, full employment level of portion is here, this portion. So if the actual GDP is here, then what will happen? The actual GDP is lower than the potential GDP. So it is creating a recessionary gap or deflationary gap. And meanwhile, inflationary gap means, see, look at this picture. This is the equilibrium level, aggregate demand, short run aggregate supply. But long run aggregate supply, this one, or potential level of GDP, this one is here, actual GDP is this one. See, actual GDP is greater than the potential GDP. This is the potential GDP, this is the actual GDP. So actual GDP is greater. So this portion is said to be a inflationary gap. So the economy is at a full employment level when actual GDP and potential GDP both are same. When actual GDP and potential GDP both are same, so that time this is said to be a full employment level. Okay. So the next one is shift of the S curve over long run. Monetarist and new classical long run aggregate supply curve over the long term. See, look at change in the quantity and quality of factors of production will shift the long run aggregate supply curve towards right. Improvement in the technology, this also will shift the long run aggregate supply curve to right. See, look at in the business cycle, we are telling, see, look at this business cycle. This curve is which is slowly and persistently increasing. So this is what it is said to be an increase in long run aggregate supply. See, look at aggregate supply curve will be moving towards right when there is an improvement in the quantity and quality of factors of production, and improvement in the technology, and increase in efficiency, which means like if the government spend lot of money for the quality education and for better health care, but in the future there will be an increase in the efficiency in the production method. So that will also increase the long run aggregate supply curve. And changes in the political institutions. So because some political institutions, some political parties are less interested in the, they will not spend massively, they may be more interested towards capitalism and less interested towards communalism. But changes in the political institution also influence the long run aggregate supply curve. So in the Keynesian view, please how the long run aggregate supply curve is shifting. See, remember, learn this one. So it moves like this, but again it is a straight line. After that it is moving like this. And some students may make a mistake like long run aggregate supply curve might be shifting like this. No, this is wrong. Please remember, this is not the correct one. Right, long run aggregate supply curve will not be shifting like this. It will be to some extent, the price level will be remaining same for both cases, and after that only it is changing. Okay, then next part is shift of SRAS. We have discussed long run, short run aggregate supply curve, and alternative views of this we have discussed. Here you can see that reflationary gap or recessionary gap in the Keynesian model, and inflationary gap in the Keynesian model. This portion is said to be a full employment level, but here the aggregate demand is little higher, actual GDP is little higher. This is the potential GDP. So actual GDP is greater than the potential GDP, so creating inflationary pressure, which means the price level is increasing. And full employment, actual GDP and potential GDP both are equal. Okay, the monetarist view is the latest one. Before that, Keynesian model was developed. The Keynesian model was developed during 1930s when there were an economic depression throughout the world. That time, Keynesian thought that in order to improve the economic activities, the government should intervene. Right, so government intervention, how it is taking place. So through reflationary or recessionary problem or inflationary problem, inflationary or reflationary gap. Okay, so during deflationary or recessionary case, how the government intervention will help to improve the economic activities, and during inflationary pressure, how the government intervention will help to improve the economic activities, and full employment level. So the full employment level is all the countries are always preferring this one. Okay, we'll just stop here and we'll start in the next.